apologies for the delay. Imran was just facing a bit of a technical problem. So until we wait for him to join, I'll start. If everyone's okay, we'll get started. Okay, well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's joining us today from around the world. We've got guests from different parts of different sort of countries working on Afghanistan. My name is Shabnam Nasimi, and in my capacity as Secretariat of the Afghanistan APPG, I'm particularly pleased to welcome you to this afternoon's event for a discussion on what's next for Afghanistan. The Afghanistan APPG was formally launched in September last year with a cross-party board of officers, and CalComs are honoured to play this convening role. We intend to provide a platform to address all aspects of Afghanistan development, security, and humanitarian situation to improve Her Majesty's government's policies towards the country. Afghanistan's 42-year conflict has entered a new and potentially final phase. There's a real opportunity to reach a peaceful resolution, and the UK can play a key role in determining whether this opportunity is realised. A responsible and coherent set of actions could greatly increase the chances of a sustainable peace agreement, but a rash and rushed approach could further prolong this long and tragic war, with negative consequences for the region and heightened threats to the security and interests of the UK and its allies. As the Afghan government and the Taliban continue to engage in very fragile peace talks, and as the US troops draw down, the efforts of the Afghanistan APPG could not be more timely or relevant. The APPG is extremely fortunate to be chaired by Imran Khan, who's the Member of Parliament for Wakefield. Before entering Parliament, Imran worked for the United Nations as a special assistant for the political affairs in Mogadishu. He's an expert in counterterrorism. We have received a few questions directed at the panelists in advance, and we will make sure that we address them. However, later in the programme, you also have an opportunity to submit questions directly to our panellists through the chat section here on Zoom, or by using the raised hand icon at the bottom of the page. And now I know that Imran is here. I'm delighted to turn it over to Imran, who will be chairing today's discussion and will provide some initial framing remarks.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and my apologies for coming in late. I have, just when you don't expect them and want them, lots of technical issues with my Mac computer, which has decided to close down on me. So I'm calling from my phone right now, and I'm told that Mac will reopen in 10 minutes time. So do forgive me. So I just want to say thank you, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on the future of Afghanistan, hosted by the APPG on Afghanistan. And I don't know what Shabnam had said beforehand, because I'm late, but I'm the chair of the APPG. And what we are concerned about doing is Afghanistan's relative prioritisation as a UK national security issue has slipped since 2010. But the scale of the challenges facing Afghanistan and their potential impacts on the United Kingdom and our interests, to me, have not diminished. The Afghanistan APPG, we hope, will provide a vital platform to discuss the fundamental issues Afghanistan faces and raise awareness of these challenges amongst parliamentarians, and hopefully help foster relations between the UK and Afghan parliaments and peoples. The Afghanistan APPG will run various webinars and events in order to achieve this objective. This webinar does come, I believe, at a critical time in Afghanistan's history, and will be an opportunity for discussion of the current situation in Afghanistan, the country's future prospects, and how Afghanistan fits into the UK's long-term strategic aims for national security and foreign policy. And it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce our speakers today, although I can't see anybody on my phone. Ambassador Rassoul, the newly appointed ambassador for the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, who's from a city I know well, Kandahar. Fatima Gailani, and Stephen Kinnock, MP. And I would like each of them to make their first opening remarks, starting with Your Excellency, if the Ambassador would please make his opening remarks.
Thank you. Dear friend, thank you for organizing this event, and thanks you for being here. First and foremost, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the people and government of the United Kingdom for their support and sacrifices. The people of Afghanistan will never forget the sacrifices of the brave British soldier killed and wounded in Afghanistan in our common fight against extremism and international terrorism. They are our heroes. We have achieved a lot together, and we are proud of that. Over the past 2 decades, Afghanistan has made significant progress in building its infrastructure, from improving its governance, providing education and healthcare to millions of men and women. Afghanistan has also made great progress in supporting and protecting values that are fundamental to our freedom, especially the area of women's rights. At present, Afghanistan has 350,000 strong national army and security personnel who are now leading the fight and conducting 90% of the operation themselves. The United Kingdom and our international partners have helped build this capacity, and shifting from an active combat role to a supportive one. We wish for the support to continue. Afghanistan is certainly at a defining moment in its modern history. Inclusive, sustainable, and dignified peace has long been the desire of every Afghan. Unfortunately, too many Afghans have lost their life and are dying every day as a result of this long and arduous conflict. Today, the peace talks have allowed an opportunity to stop this cruel war. Our legitimate endeavor for peace and preserving the achievements of the past 2 decades require the support of our partners. The Afghan government is working tirelessly to achieve peace. In this regard, we have taken many initiatives, such as creation of the High Council of Peace for Peace and National Reconciliation to build internal consensus, organizing a lawyer jirga in the release of 5,000 Taliban prisoners, presenting the plan and roadmap for peace with our partners in the Geneva Conference for International Community, building consensus in the region and beyond for peace through active diplomacy, so on. Unfortunately, since the US-Taliban deal in Doha, as you are all aware, we have seen an increased attack on the civilians. They have started targeted killing. They have attacked and killed government officials, civil servants, journalists, advocates for democracy and women's rights, and the list goes on. The Taliban, unlike their promise, have not reduced cooperation with terrorist organizations. They have time and again delayed and excused themselves on negotiating in Doha. Therefore, it's crucial to build support and consensus to pressure them to negotiate and to agree to a ceasefire. So going back to the title of our event today, what next for Afghanistan? I would say sustainable, dignified, and inclusive peace that's Afghan-led and Afghan-owned is what we should be the next. To achieve this goal, our priority is to have close bilateral relations with the United Kingdom and other allies. We need to work together to protect our hard-earned achievements and fight extremism and international terrorism, which is a threat for all of us. We wish for the United Kingdom to support our stance, preserving our democratic values such as election, human rights, particularly women's rights. Organizing pressure to Taliban to come to reduce violence and agree to a ceasefire and come to the negotiation table. Continue their support to our armed forces. Maintain the much needed financial support to Afghanistan, which has been extremely helpful in our fight and struggle. Thank you very much.
Imran, I think you're on mute.
None of it's working today, this technology, is it? It's nothing at all. So sorry. And Fatima, if you'd be kind enough to start with your opening remarks, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ambassador Rassoul, Imran Khan. I see Virginia there. I can't resist to say salam to her. And especially to Shabnam, that since the peace talks have started here, she has been extremely helpful to support us, not just women, but the peace in general. I really want to tell you all peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Because this is a word that we keep on using every day in our mouth, through our mouth, but we have to keep it in heart and work towards it. This is indeed a historical time for Afghanistan. The peace should not have an alternative. It should not be war. We should live all in the same house together. But we have to come out of this confusion. Yes, we have shortcomings in Afghanistan. I'm not going to deny that. But what excuse our friends have? We are put in a total confusion, and it is extremely important that everyone should see that the peace has to be done by Afghans and between Afghans. A quick fix will not help. Imagine in Bonn, we had one small mistake that we didn't include Taliban. Look at us. We are still brought back to square one. So that's why it is extremely important that all our friends should take the High Peace Council seriously. And if they want to invite Afghans, politicians, all that, it's good. But it has to be through our High Peace Council. We should not be divided. There are lots of things in Afghanistan, unfortunately, divide us, whether it is language or whether it is ethnicity, whether it is our sects in Islam. But don't divide us on having favorites from outside. Please deal with us together and do it through a proper channel. We are going towards peace. I have no doubt. Sooner or later, we are going to achieve that. And we need help from all our friends. As Safir said, Ambassador Dr. Zalmai Rassoul put it, that people, a whole world came to help us, and Britain was one of them. And I'm sure in the future also we will need your help. But I want you, and I request that whatever comes to Afghanistan in the future, be careful and have check and balance. Please help us to be a new country and try to be free from all sorts of bad doing, which give us a bad name in corruption and all that. When you help us, make sure that this is part of it, that corruption cannot be tolerated. Human right, women's right, the right of the minority, all this has to be asked in front of what you're doing for us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Powerful words. I'm very grateful for them. Stephen, if you could please start with your opening remarks, please, I'd be grateful.
Well, thank you very much, Imran and Shabnam, for the invitation to speak on this illustrious and esteemed panel today. I'm here representing the Labour Party's position. I'm the Shadow Minister for Asia and Pacific on Labour's front bench. So I'm really here to talk a little bit about where Labour stands on this vitally important issue, and of course very much to listen to the expertise that has been assembled here today. The first thing I'd like to say is that the Labour Party is absolutely committed to doing whatever it takes to support peace in Afghanistan. We're appalled and deeply saddened by the atrocities and the violence that's taking place far too frequently We condemn the perpetrators of that violence in the strongest possible terms, and including particularly those who are responsible for the recent deadly attacks in Kabul. We want to see the rule of law. We want to see human rights violations stopped. I mean, that's universal, wherever it is taking place in the world, not just in Afghanistan, but we have seen, of course, egregious examples of this in Afghanistan. We know it's a deeply complex issue, and that the road to peace is going to be a very difficult one to navigate. And we want to see the UK government doing more. I agree with Imran's comment earlier that Afghanistan seems to be slipping down the priorities in terms of our national security agenda in the UK, and that's a matter for regret for the Labour Party. And I think we need to do whatever we can, and I pay tribute to the important work of this all-party parliamentary group in terms of raising the issue up the agenda. I think it's also really important that we find ways of working with the Afghan diaspora in the UK. It's an incredibly important community with a very important voice, and the Labour Party would like to help that community to amplify its voice and the way it engages with the UK government. Turning a little bit to the deal and what the road to peace might look like. You know, the deal that was signed by Donald Trump in February 2020, based on the US and its NATO allies withdrawing all troops by the 1st of May this year, if the Taliban were to uphold its promises, including not allowing Al-Qaeda and other militants to operate in areas that it controls, and proceeding with national peace talks. And that, you know, any movement towards peace is to be welcomed. And we have to be very, very pragmatic when it comes to dealing with whoever we need to deal with in terms of getting talks to start and getting the prospect of peace. But we do also recognize there's a certain element of skepticism around the deal. Will the Taliban stick to its promises? Has the US potentially conceded too much ground, as some have said? It's been good to see the Taliban stopping attacks on international forces, but really, really negative to see that other attacks on Afghan government forces and other organizations and institutions have continued, and that's a matter of profound regret. Antony Blinken has warned in his letter to President Ghani that the Taliban could well make rapid territorial gains across the country in a potential spring offensive. That concern has been echoed by the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who said, if we stay beyond the 1st of May, we risk more violence, more attacks against our own troops. But if we leave, then we will also risk that the gains we've made could be lost. Biden's decision to review the deal, I think, is therefore absolutely the right decision and completely understandable. Will the remaining 2,500 US troops and 7,500 NATO troops remain, or will they be fully withdrawn? And basically the Labour Party's position is we need to be advised by conditions on the ground. We're not in government. We don't have access to the intelligence reports that are so important on the current situation, but we've got to be driven by what the facts on the ground and the expertise on the ground in terms of getting this very delicate balance right. Then we think about the peace plan, of course, kickstarting talks, Blinken's proposal bringing the two sides together with Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, India, and the United States. Absolutely the right one. It's right to be ambitious. We welcome the renewed focus on a multi-party, multilateral effort to bring stability and peaceful resolutions, even if the plan needs more work. But the continued focus has to be on a lasting political agreement, as the ambassador so rightly said, and Fatima so rightly said. We will be watching developments very carefully. We'll be pushing the UK government to do more. We feel that Pakistan is an absolutely key player in this, and the UK government's relationship and the vital role that the Pakistani diaspora plays in this country as well. We should have a much stronger voice in terms of those points of leverage with the Pakistani government and we don't think enough is being done there. We really look forward to holding the UK government to account, to do whatever we can to support the important work of this all-party parliamentary group, and to make sure that we get these peace the peace process and the peace talks fully on track, because the only hope is a political settlement to stop the appalling violence that we've seen for far too long in your country. Thank you very much, Imran.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And I'm glad to say I'm back on my computer finally, so a little bit more relaxed. There was an awful lot there, Stephen, that I could furiously agree with you on, particularly in terms of the facts on the ground. I spent several years on the ground in Afghanistan between 2008 and 12, the Pentagon and NATO and so on. And unfortunately, it's not just about collecting the facts on the ground, but understanding them on a granular nature and ensuring, and this is what Fatima referred to, that everybody's included, and in an inclusive settlement that appreciates the various facts on the ground and their perspectives. And just like when one views a sculpture, from every perspective, it looks quite different. And that's how many of the problems of Afghanistan appear. It depends where you stand and the perspective you view them. One of the other problems I think that we have seen in Afghanistan over generations are clearly delineated objectives. And so in this next section, I'm hoping that we will talk about UK-Afghanistan relations between 2001 and 2010, and the prioritization of Afghanistan as a UK national security and foreign policy issue. Also, I think on this, we could also touch upon the very important point that Stephen brought up, which is Pakistan, a place I know well and whose involvement in Afghanistan has not always necessarily been altruistic, and one that does require, although not all the problems of Afghanistan come from Pakistan, I have often said, and for a long time, that many of the solutions do. So perhaps if we could start in this first section with Fatima on your insights on UK-Afghan relations and the situation from 9/11 onwards to 2010.
It is extremely important that the whole world should take interest in Afghanistan. And of course, Britain, who had, as Ambassador Zalmai Rassoul said, had given so much sacrifices. They should see the future of Afghanistan bright, and they should be part of the countries, or with us Afghans, take pride in a day that we live peacefully together, and we will start working towards Afghanistan being able to live on its own and to use a huge amount of what we have underground could be used for the good of Afghanistan. Britain had a very close relationship, whether it was military or security and all that. But I was at that time in the Red Crescent. I was for 13 years, I was the president of the Afghan Red Crescent Society. And I saw how beautifully I was helped there. Sir Nick Young helped Afghan Red Crescent Society from a bankrupt, corrupt, and totally destroyed national society with the help of all of them, and especially with the advices that I got from him to become one of the 15 best national societies in the world. And there, we learned how to work neutral and to cater with both sides, for the government and also for the Taliban side when a humanitarian disaster happened there and they needed help. And it was recognized by the government, and it was respected by the government, that this is a role that the Afghan Red Crescent Society should have. And all this was helped by your country. But most importantly, Earlier, we talked about the diaspora. Today in Britain, we have a person like Shabnam, and we have hundreds of Shabnams and other young people that they could play a very, very positive role in the future of Afghanistan. And I want them to get involved. But something else, Imran, you said that was extremely important, that we made a huge mistake in the past, that if we had a country which was friend of Afghanistan and Pakistan, instead of ask them to mend this relationship, which has become quite sour between Afghanistan, let's not hide it, between Afghanistan and Pakistan, we were forcing our friends to make a choice to take side. This was wrong. And now in the new Afghanistan, Pakistan, like Iran, like all our neighbors, will have a special role to play. And here in Doha, in our peace talks, in the talks that we have among ourselves, we several times discussed this, that a friendly Pakistan is really, really in favor of Afghanistan. A friendly Iran is in favor of Afghanistan. And it is important that a diplomacy, a regional diplomacy should happen now to assure them that this peace is indeed in the benefit of all of us. And here, Britain could play a fantastic role between us and our Pakistani neighbors and brothers and sisters.
I think what you say there is quite right. Would any of the other panelists like to come in on comments on following on what Fatima has said?
Well, just Imran, just really to absolutely agree that I think, you know, we've got the integrated review this week. Some colleagues on the call will know what that is. Others may not. It's quite a big opportunity, really, whereby the British government tomorrow, I think, will be bringing forward a review of the UK's global strategy in terms of defence, diplomacy, and development. And it will be about, the government fleshing out what it's been talking about for some time, which is this global Britain strategy and what is Britain's role in the world post-Brexit and with all the other, challenges, geopolitical challenges that we're facing, and what role will our defence and diplomacy and development programs play. And I have to say, I think Afghanistan sits right at the middle of all three of those drivers. It's a huge opportunity, I think, for the United Kingdom to show that it can be a broker between different players, for example, between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Also, how will our defense presence be used in a very sophisticated way to help to build peace? I am a huge believer in the interface between soldiers and NGOs, and the way in which dialogue can be brokered between all sorts of different leaders on the ground, working with local players and military presence. And then, of course, our development program, the British government has taken a position to close down the Department for International Development. That's a decision I regret. I think that's a mistake, but nevertheless, we still have a development program which is seen as one of the world's best in terms of the expertise that we have. So how are we using those different tools in our toolbox to have the most positive possible impact? And for me, it's this brokerage role the UK can play, facilitating dialogue, bringing different stakeholders together, building trust between different communities and different leaders. And I think I'd like to see more of that really in the integrated review that would be published tomorrow. And it goes back as well to the point that Imran was making about the importance of facts on the ground and intelligence. That's the way to get in quality intelligence that can inform decisions, is by bringing together the different players in terms of our diplomats, our defense presence, and our development presence in a way that can actually help to improve the quality of our decisions and work with local partners to make sure that that delivers the best possible outcome.
Thank you, Stephen, for that. I think it's undeniable that the Integrated Defence and Security and Foreign Policy Review would rightly allow for Afghanistan to have a more central role. But it's clear to me that Afghanistan as a UK policy priority has slipped, both as a national security issue and as a foreign policy one. And I'm not entirely convinced, and I don't know what we do, but we have to wait till we read the integrated review, whether that its centrality to UK thought is going to be changed by the integrated review. You know, this has been because of the result of a number of things, the emergence of other security challenges, notably the threat posed by Daesh in the Levant, Mesopotamia, and indeed the growth of extremism in the Sahel and West Africa. And because of the perhaps inevitable onset of conflict fatigue and diminishing public support for military operations and engagement in Afghanistan over the past decade. So those are really big hurdles that need to be somehow overcome to, if Afghanistan is again going to take a central place in UK policy, I feel, although I may well be mistaken. I don't know what the position of the ambassadors of those views are to any other member of the panel.
Coming back to what has been done since 10 years to 2 decades in Afghanistan, I fully agree with my sister Fatima Gailani and Mr. Kinnock, but we need to mention that UK played a key role. The fact that Afghanistan is today as we are. In 2002, we started the first National Security Council in Afghanistan. And there was no army, no police, nothing in Afghanistan at that time, in the beginning of 2002. And I was the first National Security Advisor of Afghanistan, head by United Kingdom. United Kingdom helped us to make the first National Security Council of Afghanistan and helped us for 3 or 4 years to run my office. And that was the creation of the Afghan National Army, Afghan National Police, the forces that we have today. And for 7 years that I was National Security Advisor, I followed very closely how your military, your intelligence work in Afghanistan, how the sacrifices was done. So the Afghanistan that you're seeing today in our discussion about its future is not at all the Afghanistan of before 2001. Now we have institutions. We have women that are very fully powered in Afghanistan. Look, today in the Doha conference, which is a very important conference, the leading members of our delegation are women. They're there. And Fatima Gailani is one of the good examples, I think, here. Our ambassador in New York, which is running the important job, is a woman. This thing was unthinkable 10, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, in the history of a country is very short time. So the fact that Afghanistan is today, I'm not talking about the economic support, the aid for the schools, roads, etc., health, and also in the moral ground. The moral ground, Afghanistan is a democratic country. Of course, we have shortcomings. There are a lot of democracy that have shortcomings, but we have a democracy. We have elected president. We have a parliament which is functioning. We have most free speech media in the region at the moment. So this achievement was not coming for free. This achievement came with a lot of sacrifices for the Afghan people, but also our international community, the allies, but also especially United Kingdom. We know that United Kingdom has a historical relation with Afghanistan. There was an up and down, but in the last 20 years, the UK has played a key role, and we want this role to be played. And the fact that why Afghanistan is still very important, I'm not talking to keep this moral ground that all those people who are supporting democracy, women's rights, human rights, but also security-wise, is God forbid the peace concept will not succeed, and Afghanistan go back to the war. What will happen? Your security will be directly at risk. That will be at risk again, I can assure you. Afghanistan will become all this Daesh and these groups, ICE are looking some places to resemble. They already started in Syria, as you know, and Afghanistan will become another ground for them, and your security will be directly threat. Number two, the security in Afghanistan is very crucial, like my sister Fatima said, for the region. A peaceful Afghanistan is very important for our neighbors. A peaceful and stable Afghanistan is very important for Pakistan. A destabilized Afghanistan will destabilize the region, and a destabilized region will have an effect in Europe, in the United Kingdom, in the United States. I'm coming to refugee issues. All this flood of refugees, if Afghanistan becomes unstable and the region will be unstable, all these refugees will come to you one way or another. So we have a common work to do. And these are the reasons, in my humble view, that the United Kingdom, which I'm sure will be involved in the future of Afghanistan. This future of Afghanistan should be a peaceful, democratic, which all human rights and women's rights should be respected. And in Afghanistan should become a beacon of peace, not a beacon of war.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. There's only one thing I possibly would have disagreed with you on, and that's when you mentioned that Fatima was one of the good examples of Afghanistan's womanhood. In my extensive experience of Afghanistan, I came across many poor examples of Afghanistan's manhood, but never did I once come across a bad example of its womanhood. It's one thing that you've got a wonderful supply of, an abundance of. It's the men you need to look at. But anyway, you touched upon an important point, Mr. Ambassador, and that was about what I want to come to in actually the second subject, which is the Afghan-led peace-building efforts from about September 2020 to date. And you referenced the talks in Doha between the Afghan government and the Taliban, and following the agreement between the United States of America and the Taliban, which committed to the withdrawal of all foreign troops by May of this year. Now, what expectations for peace-building efforts does the panel have in Afghanistan over the coming months? And May is coming very quickly, and then the after effects of those are going to be probably somewhat pronounced, I would imagine. Unfortunately, the withdrawal agreement, in my mind, perhaps has been, I think it's a problem for the future. Unfortunately, the withdrawal agreement was not conditional on the outcome of the peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban, which in part, I think, has significantly undermined the Afghan government. And Mr. Ambassador, I would be grateful and keen to understand your thoughts on this and whether you share my misgivings and concerns.
You know, to bring a peace, we need to have an agreement. What I fully agree with Fatima Gailani saying that agreement should be among Afghans first. If not, imposed peace, which has not taken into consideration the will of the Afghan people, will not be sustainable peace. It will be short-term peace, and the short-term peace is very dangerous after that. So first, I think we Afghans should be united. We should be united, and we are working on that to have a common view of which kind of peace we want, number one. Number two, our allies should help us to achieve that, this common view that we have. And the peace should be guaranteed. The peace should be guaranteed by the region, by the world, by international community, so we can have a really sustainable peace. If there is a peace, a real peace, a sustainable peace, we don't need foreign forces in Afghanistan. We have our own force that will help now, are capable to defend our border and bring peace. We have a police force. But I think it's very crucial that this peace process should be sustainable peace for long term and take in consideration the achievement. This achievement is not only for few people. You know that 65% of the Afghan population are younger than 25 years old. So that's the future of our country. And these 25 years old boys and girls have seen some education, have lived in a free country. So these things should be taken in consideration before the idea of leaving Afghanistan should be considered.
Mr. Ambassador, with all respect, you say that we need to have Afghanistan united in order to bring peace. But what does that mean, and how does one achieve that unity? In Afghanistan's relatively short history, it's only slightly older than the United States of America, it has been one that has been characterized by disunity more than unity, not only between Pathans, Pashtuns, and Tajiks and Uzbeks, but even within khels and within families. So to talk about unity, how do we actually achieve that sense of unity and common purpose if the peace that's going to be brought is predicated upon a sense of unity?
First of all, I don't agree with you that Afghanistan is not a united country. If it had not been a united country, it would have survived the invasion of Soviet Union. The million of Afghan was shaheed during this war until today. So Afghanistan is a united country. Which I'm talking about, the united is political united view on how we can proceed in the peace process. There are different views, and we are working to unify these views. At the moment, as you know, the American proposal has been discussed by High Peace Council, by the government, in trying to have a common view, a common position of the future of peace, and conferences in Moscow and Istanbul. But on coming to the unity among Afghan people, there's no doubt. Of course, we have different ethnic group, different aspiration. But if Afghanistan was not a united country, would have not survived until today.
Fatima, please.
It is very important that someone could come and see how we operate, how we work in this here in Doha. We come from different backgrounds. We come from different languages, the sects in Islam, but we are united because of peace, because of the importance of peace. And thanks to the IT technology, we have never been so connected with the people of Afghanistan that we are today. Every day, several times per day, we have endless talks and listening to the civil society, to women's organizations, to youth, as Ambassador said. Never in the history of Afghanistan that we had so many young people committed for the future of Afghanistan and educated. If I take just women, true that 100 years ago, first women went for further education outside Afghanistan. But we saw how ups and downs that women's issue in Afghanistan had. But if today, as you said rightly, Imran, that if you see these young women of today's Afghanistan, I'm humbled in front of them with all my experience, with my education, whatever you put it together, in front of each one of them, I am humbled. I repeated this message several times, and I want to repeat it again. One young girl told me that I want you to listen properly, that I want peace. Every woman in Afghanistan wants peace. But for me, peace means that there is no war, that I could go to for my education, that one day I can work, and one day I will be equal in political participation, in economy, everything equal to a man. If you cannot bring that peace for me, I don't want that peace, and I prefer to take the risk of dying or living, but continue the way it is. So this is a very strong message. So that's why it is very important that the Afghans themselves come to an understanding. I agree that we need help, and I'm grateful for that help. Today, very few people appreciate that the role Qatar has played in this. I mean, we have to appreciate this, and the world has to appreciate this, that today they are playing a very important role. But I want all of you to play this role. every single country which had helped Afghanistan to come this far to have a role in the future in the peace in Afghanistan. And I think peace is achievable. And I think exactly like the 10 years of democracy, as we called it, at the golden time of Afghanistan, that I could show it to young people, because I come from that era. Sometimes I wish I could just take a chip and put it in a computer and show to the young generation the way I grew up. It was a peaceful country. For me, it was not an issue that I'm a man or a woman, or girl or a boy. All was important that how educated I am to be the future of Afghanistan. But I was aware that it was not in the whole of Afghanistan. The villages and the remote areas had to come up. But these kind of things that man and a woman and be scared the way we are today, that doesn't exist. And all of this is because of the war. That's why it's important that we should have peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. You speak powerfully and simply, and it's deeply affecting. Now, you mentioned, and I share with you, the optimism and the awe-inspiring nature of Afghans, women and young people, and they truly are the future of it. Now, you were talking about how foreign powers can assist and help in supporting and bringing about. So what in constructive, absolute, concrete ways do you think the United Kingdom, for example, could assist at this time better?
What I'm telling you for the UK, I'm telling this to the whole of Europe. I was 26 that I was involved in politics of Afghanistan. I'm 67 today, and I'm still going on. This is not fair. We should have peace. What I have seen, that when there is something wrong happened by our American friends, because they like quick fix, they like short-term policies, all Europeans, they have been bickering, they have been criticizing behind their back. But when the time came, they would all follow. Don't do that. Explain to them that it will not work. Help them to understand that is values that it has to be taken in consideration. And together they have to work with you. If they ask you to come to help them in the war in Afghanistan, I want you to be involved that much in peace. Be involved, take interest and interfere.
Thank you, Fatima. Stephen, do you have anything to add on?
Well, I think that one of the things that's always challenging but very important to do is understand what is it that drives people to commit these appalling acts of terrorism and violence. And I think a huge part of it is the absence of hope, the absence of a sense that things can be better. No physical or concrete realization of what a better future might look like. And into that pit of despair, you get people who are always ready to manipulate and to brainwash and to create the conditions for those acts of violence to take place. So I completely agree with Fatima and what the ambassador was saying about the progress that's been made, the creation of institutions, the hope of being able to actually get a good job, to have a future for you and your family. That's the only way that we're going to get a sustainable peace, because that removes the drivers of fear and division and sectarianism that are fertile ground for the violence and the terror that we have seen for far too long. So I think these things have to work together, but the development of a sustainable economic model that can offer to people is really the only way to create a sustainable peace.
I think, Stephen, it's absolutely right in terms of the drivers of extremism, radicalization, the pits of despair, as you put it, and they are deliberately created. I remember very well, both in Kunduz and over the border in Kuna, speaking with those who've been affected by the indoctrination of Mullah Fazullah from Swat. And in fact, I helped create the curriculum for the child suicide bombers counter-insurgency program in Subayun, which is a Pashto word for the first ray of the morning dawn. And the way that young people, all of their hope was taken. And even if they suffered poverty, they were then habitually raped and the most beastly tortures done to them until they had no sense of themselves. And some fake idea of Jannat seemed a possible better option than life in this hell that had been created for them. So all of that resonates and is quite right, Stephen. Now, the third topic I wish to touch upon was, again, I'm afraid, Mr. Ambassador, I'm not perhaps the biggest, most positive person at this point. I'm an awful realist in terms of Afghanistan, but frustrated by the escalating violence and the slow pace of negotiations between the Taliban and the Afghan government that have been underway since last year has resulted in Washington, under Mr. Biden, handing both sides, the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the Taliban, a proposal for peace, a copy that's been circulated only in the last few days. Now, I understand the hope is that the US proposal could serve as a catalyst for both sides to make peace, perhaps even before May Day, before the 1st of May, which is the deadline, as we know, of the US troop withdrawal under the US Taliban deal reached a year ago. Now, for now, the talks in Qatar appear hopelessly stalled. Fatima is closer to it than me. So the negotiate, but this is why you can come and advise me better, with still arguing over the agenda. Now, Karzai did not elaborate on his cause for optimism. Meanwhile, although there has been people have spoken of reasons to be optimistic, but there's been no causes given that I have come across yet. So meanwhile, Washington is still reviewing the Taliban deal with the Trump administration, signed on the 29th of February, I think it was, last year. Now, the Taliban have until now rejected the idea of an international force or international forces staying in Afghanistan after May the 1st. However, a series of international gatherings are in the works to jumpstart the peace talks, and Russia's invited Ghani, the Taliban, regional players, and the US to Moscow next week. And there will also be a conference in Turkey, where the US Secretary of State, Blinken, has said he expects to see a peace agreement finalized. So that's the overarching big picture. And dear old Saeed Jawad is always where the action is. He's just left London and now he's in Moscow for these things. Stephen, I was wondering, from your position, an overarching strategic level of what's happening there, your thoughts on the peace plan proposed by the US and its implications for, one, the future of Afghanistan, and also the likely impact on Britain's engagement with Afghanistan through the lens of the peace plan as proposed by the US.
Yeah, thanks very much, Imran. I should also apologise. I unfortunately have to leave at 1:30, so very, very soon. But
the question was longer than the answer.
Yeah. I'd love to come back to you on this, and certainly look forward to staying engaged with the APPG. Look, we've got to start with dialogue, and every successful peace process in history has been based on bringing a range of players and actors together to make things happen. So I think the Blinken initiative is actually a very significant step in the right direction. I think it's very positive to see the new American administration re-engaging the United States, playing the role that it must play as a broker and a facilitator. The key is always to find that balance between supporting the peace process, but not suffocating it by not allowing the key people in this, which is the Afghan people and their leaders, to be the leading voices in making this work, in anchoring the peace process and ensuring that it grows roots, because there's no point in the international actors coming in, getting a good photo shoot, having the opportunity of showing that they're shaking hands and doing something, but then overplaying their hand and suffocating what needs to be owned and led by the Afghan people. So it requires humility, leadership based on humility from every player in the room. And sometimes humility isn't the first thing that springs into your mind when you think about Washington, DC or Moscow, or indeed some of the other key players. So they're going to have to take that step forward and then take that step back and allow the Afghan leadership to have the dialogue, but creating the conditions for it and putting in just that little bit of pressure to show the world is watching. And it's vital that the Taliban and the Afghan leadership behave with responsibility now and do not allow a history of animosity. Perhaps personal scores sometimes get settled in these things. We know how it all works. That all has to be put to one side. People have got to be the adults in the room, showing the maturity that's required to make the peace process move forward. So the Labour Party warmly welcomes the moves by the US administration. It's long overdue, but it's also, we've got to be in this for the long run. I think it's extremely ambitious to think that the troops could be withdrawn within the time frame. It would be such a tragedy to see all of the gains that have been made in recent years being reversed by withdrawing too soon. So a very difficult balance to strike. I hope, Imran, I've at least tried to give some thoughts about the mood music around it, but it's going to be up to the leaders in the room to make it happen.
It's been like the most delicious starter, which has just made us hungrier for the main course. So I'm so sorry you had to flee, but we look forward to taking this up at another occasion.
Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you. And Fatima, or Your Excellency, the Ambassador, would you like to add?
Actually, I wanted to give you the reason. Actually, it is the conversation and the negotiation is happening every night till very, very late at night. Both contact groups are meeting, and they have made very important and significant successes they have made, which soon will be announced. We are very much committed that hopefully, not to rush it, but meaningfully, to come to the ceasefire and political agreement with the Taliban before Turkey meeting. And it is very important that the Doha negotiations will be connected to Turkey, because if Turkey is successful and we come to an understanding, perfect. If we don't, then we have still this option to come back and continue in Doha. And the same people that we are talking to each other, the same people will be going to Turkey, plus, of course, the politicians. But remember that most of these politicians, with the exception of one or two, they are under the umbrella of the High Peace Council. So they have agreed. And we, sitting in Doha, talking, most of us are representatives of those politicians. So it is this, I don't know, even in Tolo News yesterday, they say that the negotiations have stopped. It hasn't stopped. Actually, it is going much more faster than before the breaks. I just wanted to give you some good news.
Thank you, Fatima. That's very kind of you. And I think I should go on to Shabnam. Do you agree I should go straight onto the questions now? Because of my computer breaking down, I don't have the agenda or anything.
Yes, question.
I'm just concerned about the time.
Yeah, Q&A next. I think we've got some hands up.
Thank you so much.
We've got some hands up
I
now.
see in the side chat that Dawood Zakaria has wishes to ask questions. So Dawood, if you would go ahead and fire.
Thank you very much, Imran, and thank you to all the speakers here today. I completely agree with what was said before, that sustainable peace will only happen if if we have prosperity in the country and people are given jobs and ambitions and personal growth. I also think that the private sector can move a lot faster than the public sector in stimulating this. Obviously, the key areas in the country are natural resources, agriculture, health, and education. And my question to all of the panelists is the following. Is there going to be a central body created to help foreign firms in the private sector navigate what is obviously quite a treacherous and complicated landscape for inward investment in Afghanistan? And will a similar body be created in the UK to sort of channel private sector investment into Afghanistan and avoid things such as corruption and shorten really the time to get on the ground and help the country?
Dr. Rassoul, Mr. Ambassador, would you care to answer that first?
I fully agree with you, Dawood, that the private sector should be involved. That is the future. First of all, I think there's a need in the United Kingdom to have this sort of formation to work on that. I agree with you, and as far as concerned the embassy, we are going to work on that. But also, in order to invest on Afghanistan, we need to have peace. It is very difficult to bring investment in Afghanistan if we don't have peace. So they are very interrelated. Peace is not sustainable without development, and development cannot come without peace. But the priority for the moment should be peace first. And I'm sure Afghanistan is a rich country, and in agriculture and mining and in human resources. So combine all these things with the regional cooperation, which is now very important, we can have a sustainable economy in order to give job and education to our people. But again, in my view, humble view, the peace is the priority at the moment. In order to bring sustainable peace, we need to be prepared for the economic growth in the future. In order to do that, we need to work on from now on how the structure will be prepared for the future of investment. And in this case, regarding the United Kingdom, I fully agree that we need to establish from now on or reinforce if there anything exists for creating an organism which will encourage us to encourage a businessman in the United Kingdom to invest in Afghanistan.
Fatima?
The good news is that it is not just our side which see the importance of investment, foreign investment in Afghanistan. The Taliban sees that also, and they openly talk about it, and they think that one of the reasons that they couldn't succeed in their own, when they had a government, was because of the poverty of people, and it was the poverty of people which opened doors for others. This is what they believe. And they also try to understand that what kind of government we should have, which would attract foreign investment. Dawood, it's good to see you, and I would love to see you one day help in Afghanistan the way you're, mashallah, successful here.
Dawood, I think it's a very, very interesting question. I can't tell you how much I agree with you. I think the private sector is an integral part of foreign relations and should be employed as such by the United Kingdom. And it's been long neglected. And trade and investment overseas and free trade has lifted more people, billions and billions, more people out of poverty than any form of aid and development in the history of mankind. And some form of structure to that, or guidance, and understanding the power alongside soft power and government initiatives of the private sector to help cement peace, the peace that the ambassador was referring to, by providing the hope, the poverty of which Stephen was speaking about before. I honestly think that the power of the private sector is actually best placed to do that. Not as good as, but better placed. And in many respects, it takes away some of the more divisive politics because it is private sector. But any ideas, I would love you to chat with you more and to create a working group. The APPG could do a paper on it, on looking at how in foreign policy, in trade and development and diplomacy, the role of the private sector should be rightfully, correctly recognized, and if not shepherded, better employed by the state. In the same way that the state employs well soft power in quite a well-controlled and understood way. The United Kingdom is the best proponent of soft power, possibly in the world, for us to do the same with commercial investment and trade power. I think it's a very, very interesting point now, indeed, very thought-provoking. If we could go on to Richard Britton.
Yes, hello. I'm the managing director of a company called Alsys. We've been working supporting Afghanistan for the last 16 years. I posted in the chat a question and I've added some background detail to it, but it very much builds on what Dawood has just said and what you've just said, Imran, about the subnational spoilers to the peace and the private sector's role within that. My point is about these checkpoints that are scattered along the main arterial roads within Afghanistan that are having a devastating and debilitating impact on the private sector's ability to increase revenue growth, increase industry, and that free market trade you talk to. I'll give you one example. In Kandahar city, there is a gathering point where trucks of about 100 at a time gather, and under Afghan National Police protection are driven down to Spinboldak to cross into Pakistan. Truck drivers transporting goods pay $940 per truck for the honor of that protection. Per year, that one gathering place gathers $9.7 million to the Afghan National Police in illicit revenue. That is just one of hundreds of checkpoints across the country. If you're a trader or a transporter trying to move goods, that has a serious impact on your bottom line. And it is their dear wish that a number of these checkpoints, or as many of them, can be removed as possible. But here's the challenge in terms of the subnational politics of the peace agreement, is that you risk fragmenting spoilers who continue to block and get in the way of this opportunity. So I take you up. I'd love to support this working group. We have 3 papers on private sector value chains across Afghanistan and its trade between Iran and Pakistan coming out in the next 2 weeks, which gives some very granular detail of the sort that Neil Kinnock was just talking about that I think will be helpful. But for now, I'd be keen to hear any thoughts on how you address these checkpoints given their impact on trade.
Now, Richard, I think it's a very, very interesting point, and one again that it's not unique, although it's a beastly and awful cancer to development and growth. It's not unique to Afghanistan. I have seen exactly the same awful trade in its ramifications in Somalia, in Congo, in Syria, in many of places where the writ of the state is contested, militancy and strife is widespread. And if one can get a hold of that, you're actually an awful lot closer to actually helping the holistic solution coming about. I do like the idea of bringing this into some sort of a paper, possibly with a wider focus than just Afghanistan, because it is such a common plague in as I said, in territories where the writ of the state is not yet cemented. But as it's the places you're talking about, we're literally on the ambassador's doorstep. If we could go to the ambassador for his thought on this first. Being a Kandahari.
You know, the problem, and I'm not denying it, but we are working on that as much as we can. in Afghanistan, when you're at war, your forces are busy to do the war every day, are dying. So for these issues in the same time, it's very difficult. It's very difficult, and I'm convinced that peace coming, hopefully, these problems by itself. With the war, at time the security forces can get more time, have more space to solve this problem. But I agree, it is a problem.
Fatima, do you have any observations on this point?
The good news is that one of the things that the contact group are now, I mean, for the beginning of this week, which Saturday for us, this is one of the things about that how much it harms the business, how much it harms local and international businesses. So they are talking about the security of roads. Both sides are talking about this. And I hope that tomorrow.
I wanted to stress though as well that because a lot of people try to, I think somewhat unfairly, try to make such issues such as these that Richard highlighted unique and specific to Afghanistan. And I just wanted to that unfortunately they're not. I remember working for President Goodluck Jonathan and the United States government in Nigeria, the river states, looking at illegal oil bunkering and the illicit economy there. And over a third of Nigeria's vast oil production was going away with illegal oil bunkering per day, impacting an economy as wealthy and diverse as Nigeria's to huge detriment. So it is a systemic problem evident in many territories, which anything to help solve, I think, is required because it's a great cause of real human suffering and hardship.
Imran, sorry to intervene there. We've got just a few more minutes. If you can just take one more question.
Because I'm just going.
Okay, I think Marzia Babakar Khil had a question she has sent to us in advance via email. We could just ask her for her questions and then we'll conclude.
Is she on the line?
She is on, but she's on mute. Marzia, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. To be honest, my very important concern, what will you do to enforce the ceasefire when the Taliban are set at the peace talks, but women and girls are still being blown up and killed? This is, I think, the most important thing. We should solve this problem because the peace talk keep continuing, but people in Afghanistan sacrificing every day. And the Taliban, they changed the strategy of war. Thank you.
Fatima, would you like to first respond to that? Thank you so much, Marzia.
Salam, Marzia Jan. This is that we are talking about. In top of our agenda was ceasefire, but of course it was different on side. So this is a negotiation. We are trying our best to get where we want and try to get where they want. And I strongly believe that when we come to a political settlement, most of things will be taken care of. And my hope is that slowly ceasefire or even periods of ceasefire could be connected to other things like the prisoners or other things. We are working on it very hard. Negotiation is not easy. It is much harder than even we anticipated. So we are trying our best to get what the people of Afghanistan, which is ceasefire. We are not pushing for the reduction of violence because it didn't work. Who is there to measure it? So we want straightforward ceasefire, and we are working very hard. When it is going to come, it's very difficult to foresee.
Thank you so much. And Your Excellency?
The violence of today is not acceptable at all. There is no doubt about it. But as Gailani said, peacemaking is a long issue. It's a difficult thing. In any peace agreement that we have seen around the world in the recent history, has taken longer time. Afghanistan has been at war for 40 years. And these wars are interconnected, started by the invasion of Soviet Union. The invasion of Soviet Union provoked the extremism provoked the Talibanism until today. So it is not a single war. It is a continuous war of 40 years. And it was not a war of Afghans, it's a war of the region taking place in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been at peace for a long time, and you have very good relation with all our neighbors. The invasion of Afghanistan came from a neighbor country. It didn't come from somewhere else. So solving the 40 years of war with all these ramifications, internal and regional, need times. So, but the good news, as Fatima said, is the quasi-majority of Afghan people aspire for peace. Everybody wants peace in Afghanistan, but not a peace at any price, because a peace at any price will not solve the problem. It will not be sustainable peace. So we need to be patient. We need to reduce violence. We need to come a ceasefire, at least the beginning, in order to continue about the future of Afghanistan. But that needs patience, that needs the help from our allies and friends. And I'm very happy today of being with you and our friends to talk about these things, and hope that in the future we'll be much more optimistic about peace.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I thought what excellent words to close this session on. Your point about not peace at any price, but also the external and regional dimensions of the more than 40-year conflict in Afghanistan. I remember as a child, used to going to Kabul with my family from Peshawar, and thinking it was, compared to Peshawar, how Kabul was a very advanced and forward-looking place. And in fact, in December 1979, as a 6-year-old child, we were in Afghanistan at a friend of mine, my father's friend, who did medicine with my father in London, who was an Afghan. And we went to his wedding. And on the way back from the wedding, we were going to take 2 or 3 days and visit various friends on the way. And I think we were quite far west, maybe going almost as far as Farah. And we turned the radio on in the car, and it was BBC World Service. This is London calling, and they told us about the Red Army invading. It was obviously Christmas Eve, 1979. And then as we were moving forward, at every village, we stopped the car and checked if there was a telephone, because of course there was no mobile phones there. And after several hours, we found a village which actually had a telephone, and where it was able to make, and it took a long time to get a line to Pakistan, make a call to Pakistan to let them know that we were coming. So hold the gates at Tokhon so we could get through. But the game change from that time when I was 6, from my earlier memories to then subsequently, you're quite right. Unfortunately, those events in 79 were very much, there was not compatibility before. There have been local issues and problems in Afghanistan for some years. But I think you're quite right, Mr. Ambassador, to point to the relative peace and prosperity that there was. And I hope, we all pray, will be returned again. And all in all, this has been a very interesting discussion. And I wish to thank Fatima Bibi and Your Excellency and Stephen for all of your insights. Just on a final note, to say that the APPG intends to organize more events like this in the future. So please do look on our social media for regular updates and events. And I look forward to meeting you all, hopefully, not virtually, but in reality, in the coming months. So thank you so much. Slide.
Thank you.
Final remark. Thank you to our chair, Imran, for moderating today's discussion. As you would all agree, this is incredibly timely and relevant. And the APPG does hope to have similar events, as Imran had mentioned, in the coming months and weeks. We are also currently creating a patrons board if you'd like to work with the APPG directly and support our work, and we will follow that up with you after the event. Thank you again, and we hope to see you in our events in the future. Thank you. Have a good day.